I wanted to use some COVID data that I've been looking at and show you how you can incorporate chi-square goodness of fit into what we're seeing in Maryland versus what we're seeing nationally with the breakdown of COVID. So this is data as of June 2nd, the percentage of cases gathered from national data. Now, I want to point out something here. There's a lot we don't know. If you look at the very last column, there is data not available. And this is people who are going through drive-through testing, who aren't necessarily submitting all their information in those testing sites. And so there's a lot we don't know about the race breakdown. So I want you to pay attention to that. But to the best of our ability, this is what we're seeing on the national level. So now let's look at what's happening in Maryland. Okay, so according to Maryland Department of Health, again, based data from June 2nd, here's the breakdown of race in Maryland. And we want to see is there evidence to say that Maryland is different than the US population? Now, there is a way to do this with the chi-squared test of homogeneity. But in order to do that, you need to take out the Maryland cases. So what I'm going to do is just look at the breakdown of Maryland versus what's expected based on the population numbers from the US. Okay, so that's why I'm doing a chi-squared goodness of fit test versus a chi-squared test of homogeneity. Okay, so let's look at the breakdown from Maryland. I put it into a table, and then we're looking at what is expected. Now, when I calculated the expected values, I took the percentages from the first screen and I multiplied them by the total of cases in Maryland. So here is what I would expect to be happening in Maryland based on race, given the percentages of what's happening at the national level, right? So now if we're going to run a chi-squared test, we should check conditions. Now, guys, this is complicated because we don't necessarily, well, we don't have a random sample. This isn't an experiment. To the best of our knowledge, this is population data of everyone who has been tested. This is what we are seeing. And correction, of everyone who has been diagnosed as positive with COVID. This is the breakdown we're seeing. So also, because of that, we don't necessarily have independence between trials, right? We've learned a lot about this disease and this virus, and it's so contagious that if one family member gets it, probably the rest of the family is going to get it. So we don't really have independence either. But I still feel like it's important to examine what's happening here because we do, in my opinion, we have something better than randomized data. In a randomized sample, we have population data of everyone in the country that has tested positive. Okay. Again, this is based on people who have tested positive with the disease and the breakdown of race. Okay, so what we're going to say is we're going to proceed with caution, understanding that none of this is from a randomized sample. All right, to do all of this, I'm going to actually go to the calculator. Okay, I want you to know how to do this in your calculator. So I'm going to put the observed counts. What I see in Maryland goes into list 1. And then I'm going to put the expected counts into list 2. Those are what I just calculated in the table. And then once I have list 1 and list 2 filled out, you're going to go to stat, test, and scroll down to chi-squared goodness of fit. Now, in order to do a chi-squared test of homogeneity or independence, you would have to actually enter the data from 2 different populations into a matrix. And I'll try to make a video with data on that shortly. Okay, so once I do that, I get these values. A chi-squared of 4,490, actually, I have my decimal in the wrong place, is 44,924.4. That is a huge test statistic. So it's no surprise that the probability of that happen is essentially zero. Yes, this is our p-value right here. The probability of us getting this test statistic or more extreme is about 0% chance. Why? Look, go back to that data. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, and that was kind of on purpose. If we go back to that data in this table, guys, we see some pretty startling differences that are contributing to that large chi-squared test statistic. Look here with the African American population. That's a huge difference. The data not available. Again, a really big difference. The only one that doesn't have a significant difference between what's observed and what's expected is really in the Asian community here. Okay, so it's no surprise that we have such a large chi-squared test statistic. Okay, so we do have convincing evidence to say what's happening at the national level is very different than what's happening for the population of Maryland. Now, there's lots of reasons why that could be true. We could continue to look at the breakdown of race in Maryland versus the national level. Okay, so it's important when you're watching the news and you're taking in national data that you still watch the local news and see what's happening at the local level, or do your research, know what's happening at the state level, because what's happening nationally can be very different on what's happening locally. I hope this was interesting, and I also plan on giving you more resources on how to use chi-squared when analyzing COVID data.